here is sick and tired of applying and dealing with their resume and getting ghosted and feeling like you are in a position of lower power and you have to try too hard to convince a hiring manager when you've done so much in your career. Or maybe you are trying to go to a new country, you're in a different location, and you feel like you have to reinvent the wheel. So, share with me in the chat if you identify with that, because if you do, then you are definitely in the right place. By the way, when I say influencer, I'm not talking about celebrities. I am talking about leveraging a similar model in order to position yourself as a professional so that people come to you. Because who wants to be like Simon Sinek, where people don't even need to get a pitch in order to buy from him? All they see is his brand and they're sold. Who wants to feel that way? My promise to you today is I'm going to show you how to build a career congruent with who you are without feeling like an imposter. Here's a question for you all. Why do you do what you do? What is the point of it all? Why do we show up to work? A lot of you don't even know, right? A lot of you don't even know why you do what you do. Okay, I enjoy my work, it makes me happy. But why? Build great products and meet great people. So basically, you're telling me, and Peter, I agree with that because, like, I'm here, even though I had a tragic death in my family. And what got me out of bed today is because there is a bigger reason for me. It's not about just pulling a bunch of slides or teaching people how to build resumes or interviews or create a job search strategy. It's a lot deeper than that. It's a lot easier, at least for me, it was a lot easier to start with how I didn't want to feel. Okay? I'm going to show you a collection based on thousands of people that I've spoken to in the past 4 years, things that people didn't want to feel. So, one of them being facing imposter syndrome after so many rejections. Who doesn't want to deal with imposter syndrome? Hey, if you enjoy imposter syndrome, then maybe this is not the training for you. And people want to actually have the ability to push themselves to do the hard things, but they don't necessarily enjoy that it feels hard. Or fear of the unknowns. Who hates the whole mystery around, are they going to call me after the interview or not? Who identifies with that? Let me know in the chat. Being ghosted. And I'm not talking about after a Tinder date. And I think the worst of it all is feeling that self doubt. Yes, we do all feel that way occasionally, and it's definitely not an enjoyable feeling, right? What about feeling stuck in the same role? I know that I felt that way because of the golden handcuffs. I had family obligations. And so I felt that I had to stay where I was in order to make ends meet. And I'm sure that there are people in here who feel that way as well, especially with what happened in the economy. And maybe you are making a change in your career. Maybe you're in a new environment, whether you just moved to Canada or the US or a new country as an immigrant. You feel you might have taken a job that's more junior, right? And a lot of my clients, because a lot of my clients are, I will say, very driven people who love making social impact, they get frustrated by not having the ability to help people. And of course, for a lot of you who are high achievers, not feeling competent, because we all want to feel that we're adding value, undervaluing your own ability, even not knowing what your ideal job is, feeling like you're lost, you don't know what to do. You're showing up to work, you're feeling like a corporate zombie. And that's the reason I frankly quit over text for some of you who may have read my story. I felt like everything was great on paper, but I quit over text because I wasn't doing a job that was congruent with who I am. All right. Now, here's the irony. all these people that I shared with you who feel that way, it shocks me what they've done in their life. And I'm just sitting and maybe some of you can relate to this. Like you've done so much in your life, but you don't understand why it's not being reflected in your career. It's almost like you have a double personality. So here are some examples of what these clients who initially felt that way. I have clients who feel this way, even though they've coached and trained hundreds of people on public speaking. Here's the irony. Yet they're struggling with articulating their value. Some of them have delivered TEDx talks. Some of them, I have a client who started their DJ business. I have a client who spoke to the president of India, yet has imposter syndrome and a lot of self doubt. And I also have a client who's an adventurer who demonstrates a lot of grit. He stayed overnight in the foothills of the Himalayas. And I've had a client who built a game that got featured on the Apple Store, yet he was wondering if he'd get into a product company or if he is good enough, just because he didn't fit into that box of having a degree. Okay, isn't that crazy? So who identifies with that, where you feel you've accomplished so much in your life, whether it's personally or professionally, yet you still have that self doubt and you feel frustrated with yourself? Anyone? So here's the question: why do we doubt ourselves and struggle to sell our value when we've done so much, right? So I'm going to share with you my personal story to help you understand and to give you insight. Maybe through my story, you'll realize why you feel that way. And also because there is a lesson behind it. All right. So that is a photo of me laughing as a child, yet it wasn't the most amazing childhood. I personally felt that I had a strong voice and I knew what I wanted since I was a child, since I was a little girl. But I felt like a prisoner to all the people that I had to please in order to survive. And while I know that my parents did the best that they could, given the circumstances and what they had, in a way, I felt like I was a prisoner to them because I felt that I had to please them. I did things I didn't enjoy, but I was good at to make them feel proud and to feel accepted. A lot of you may know this. Biologically, one of the biggest needs as a child is that we feel we have a great need of acceptance. That's how we survive. And where does a lot of that acceptance come from? From our family. So if we don't get that early in our childhood, it can be unresolved and it can manifest into a lot of things into our adulthood. So, when I was in third grade, my father slapped me on my face because I couldn't answer a math question fast enough. Now, some of it is cultural, but my dad was a bit extreme. And of course, as a child dealing with that trauma, what it ended up doing to me is it paralyzed me when he did that. And it created this negative association with learning. I felt like I was a burden whenever I was trying to learn something from someone. So I carried with me this fear of learning fast enough. I always would shut down, would feel paralyzed whenever I was learning something new, whether it was in academia, whether when I was pursuing dance as part of performance teams, whether I was training at the gym with personal trainers or even in the corporate world. I had this big fear of learning. What I kept telling myself was that I was an embarrassingly slow learner and a burden to anyone who's trying to teach me anything. But the silver lining is that I ended up teaching myself. I acquired that skill of becoming a great teacher. And so that's always been my purpose and my driver because I've experienced that, because I've experienced the pain of feeling like there isn't enough psychological safety for me to learn. I decided that one day I teach people like me in a way that would make them feel comfortable so that they never doubt their learning abilities. So that was my purpose, whether it was in university, in the corporate world, and in my business. All right. So now here's the deal. What made this journey possible? What made it meaningful for me to, be a coach and teach people, whether it was in the corporate world for more than 13 years and, in my business for close to 4 years? What do you think helped me survive? Who knows? Who can guess? Fabio, I totally get that. Depending on what culture you're from, our parents can be hard asses, right? I know in Eastern society it's that way, even more prominently. And I come from the Middle Eastern culture. There was this high expectation. You need to be a doctor, you need to be an engineer, you need to fit in that box, all that stuff, right? Maria, yes, purpose is what kept me going, but purpose alone wasn't enough. Okay. Even though I had the sense of purpose, there was a lot of loneliness because I felt misunderstood. But what made me push through that loneliness is not just that sense of purpose. What made me feel like I belong every step of the way, I may not have felt that way from my own parents, but growing up and maturing, how did that happen? It was being around the right people. Someone wise said this to me: you don't choose your family, but you can build your own connections. And I don't want to compare, I don't want people getting mad at me and say you can't call, the people at work your family, blah, blah, blah. But you get to choose who you want to surround yourself with. You get to choose your board of advisors. And so, what kept me through it, yes, part of it was the purpose, but I will tell you that I wouldn't have gone to where I am today without surrounding and choosing the right people to be surrounded with who liked me and trusted me. Okay. The people who believe in you and see you as an influencer, they are the right people. And so, how do we build an influencer brand that will attract the right people in our professional circles and our professional lives without having to try too hard to constantly prove ourselves? That's $1 million question, right? But I'm not going to charge any of you $1 million. All right, who's wondering? Who wants to learn this? Because I literally, I spent thousands of dollars, being part of tons of trainings, tons of coaching programs, lots of therapy, lots of coaching in order to figure this out. And I can finally package it and systemize it so that you can all learn it. Anyone curious? So here's an example of how I did this in my business, right? These are all clients that I love, and you can see that the connection and the bond, right? A lot of us approach our career almost like in a transactional way. Okay. So it's so important. It's so important. I'm telling you all. This is why they tell you that your network is your net worth, but they don't teach you, of course, how to do it. And today I'm going to teach you. So this is I'm just trying to give you evidence here because some of us, especially if we're super analytical, we tend to need evidence. Oh no, maybe you got lucky. Maybe you already had a big following. Maybe you were a recruiter and you already had a ton of connections. Friends, I wasn't. In fact, let me just zoom in here into this. Okay, that was me. You can see the difference. Not as elevated from a brand perspective. And this is me today. Okay. And I had barely 500 followers. And here you can see, actually, this is an older screenshot, but if you go into my LinkedIn profile, it's 28,000. And this goes to show because I literally did this, took the screenshot, like in December, and my following already went up to 28,000. Okay. So I'm all about making things more visual. And so I'm going to give you a visual here. Let me see if I can. Let me just show the screen here. Who can identify this? Your reality on the left side. Let me know in the chat if your current situation, your current reality, is you feel like a prisoner to a toxic environment because of money. Who can identify with that? So, my goal as we go through the training is we take you from feeling like, is to give you a strategy that will take you from feeling like a prisoner to a toxic environment because of money and being respected by your boss and peers. Because we don't want to show up to work where we are surrounded by a bleep bleep, right? It just makes it so hard. It really makes it so hard when that happens. And who here, give me a like, if you're constantly told that you're not ready to get promoted, or you have this misconception that just because you didn't do this exact title, that you're not experienced enough. Okay? My desire for you is that using this strategy, you are well compensated with more decision making power. It frustrates me when I see clients who are badasses at what they do. And I can tell because I've been doing this for so long. I can talk to a person for 10 minutes and tell, but for some reason, they're going after the wrong roles. And the irony of it is they get rejected because they're overqualified. And tell me if you're underselling yourself because you're an immigrant and you don't know people. My desire for you is that you build upon that experience, you grow without having to start over. Okay. And then the last one, if you feel unfulfilled in your career, I will tell you, unfortunately, that most of the things on the left apply to me. This is why I'm passionate about sharing this with you all. But if I would pick one that applied to me the most, it's definitely feeling unfulfilled in my career. And so I'm hoping that you will see how the strategy is going to help you identify a career aligned with who you are. Because at the end of the day, if we can't be ourselves, what is the point? It's just not sustainable. It's just not sustainable. This whole thing about fake it till you make it, it's like someone who just doesn't enjoy going to the gym and lifting weights, maybe they'll do it for 2 weeks, but because they hate it so much, it's not gonna be part of their lifestyle, right? And that's what happens when you are trying to fake it till you make it. I really hate that term. It's one of my biggest pet peeves. Okay, so in the current reality that you're at, if you are struggling with all of the things on the left and you're trying too hard, it's because you're being perceived as an amateur compared to where you want to be. Now, don't get offended. Has a relative definition of amateur. I don't want you to compare yourself to other people, but I want you to compare yourself to where you want to be. Like, I'll give you an example. My dream is to have my own TV show. Compared to Oprah, obviously I'm an amateur, right? Maybe compared to other career coaches, I'm an influencer, right? So you got to compare your reality to where you want to be. And so if you're not where you want to be, if you don't have the decision making power and all the things that I shared with you on the right, then you're perceived as an amateur. And today I'm going to share with you my influencer pyramid. I'm going to break it down step by step. So if you leave right now, you're going to miss out. If you stick around, you will learn. And I'm not saying this because I want to bait anyone, but because as a teacher, I want to make sure that we go through this step by step and we don't skip, so that you understand this very well and so that you come out of the session with a deep level of understanding, and that this does not become just some other training that you attended and you put on a shelf. Again, Because a lot of you need evidence that this works, I've used this on a client and took him from someone who has imposter syndrome because he didn't have a degree to an agile mentor at a top gaming company in Europe. Okay. And I've used this influencer pyramid to help someone who was a doctor who was from Nigeria. She had no tech or North American experience and she landed as a product manager. And you can go check her profile on LinkedIn. She's still there. And I've also used this for a client who was in Mexico and landed a job at Amazon while still in Mexico. All right. And it was a product manager, senior product manager role. Never had the title. And also a client of mine who was at the same company for more than 18 years. And again, imposter syndrome because she's been in the same company for a while, didn't know how to translate her experience to another organization or figure out what she wanted to do and how to even influence hiring managers to see her as an authority. Okay. And she definitely didn't do that by starting over or taking a more junior level role. In fact, all of my clients, I'll tell you, who go through career transitions, they end up increasing their salary, not lowering their salary to get their foot in the door. Okay. And of course, I've had a number of clients who broke into people manager roles. So senior directors all the way to VP. Okay. And if you think that this only works for people in US and Canada, I've actually worked with people all over the world. I haven't updated this. It doesn't represent all the different countries, but you can see here UK, Australia, Mexico, Singapore, Malaysia, UAE, right? So this works in Germany. So this works in, doesn't matter where you are in the world. And of course, these are just examples of some of the organizations where my clients landed, ranging from startups like Majuri all the way to large organizations like Amazon and Red Hat. Okay, so before we get into the influencer pyramid, what I'm going to do, how I'm going to teach you this, is I'm going to help you understand your mistakes and then I'm going to tell you what you need to do instead. Okay? Who can identify with this mistake? Hint, if you are a jack of all trades, you struggle with this. Some of you have a tendency where you want to improve your chances. And so you talk about the 10 different things that you're good at. You brand yourself and market yourself as someone who knows everything, right? Instead of focusing on the one thing that you're great at. I'm not saying that you're not good at a bunch of things, okay? But I'm sure out of those 10 things, there's got to be something that stands out. I call it your superpower. So, who here is guilty of this? Raise your hand if you're guilty of this. So, here's the deal, the one thing you're good at isn't tied to your title. And this is why people struggle with this so much, especially people like me who pivoted more than 5 times in their career. So I'm going to show you something here. These are snippets from my LinkedIn just to show you how I've moved around and, the different titles that I've held. Do you see a common thread? Can you guess my superpower based on the different titles that I've held? What do you see as the common thread across the board? Agile transformation coach, senior product manager, business analyst. By the way, these are just examples, not the whole thing from my career, but just snippets. Technology consultant at one of the big 5, and a master career coach, founder of my own business. Working with people, change manager, different roles. Come on, let's go deeper. Come on, what superpower? It's a trait. It's a trait. It's not a title. What do you think is the common thread? What makes me good at what I do? Remember my story. What did I say in my story? Why is it important for me to do what I do? Starts with a T. I love to teach. Okay, that's my superpower. Now, if I get even more granular, and I love that, Maria, making people feel comfortable. If I were to get more granular, I'll tell you this, as an agile coach, I was able to identify what my client's zone of genius is. That is how I was able to basically recommend what role they're going to have on the team. And so a lot of what I've been doing throughout my career has been about helping people figure out what their career sweet spot so that they're doing jobs aligned with who they are. In fact, I'll tell you a little story. When I was an agile coach, I did a retrospective. So, for those of you who don't know what agile is, we'll call it a lessons learned. I gathered all of my developers and all the team members, and I did this exercise where we figured out what each person's intrinsic motivator is. And one of my clients' intrinsic motivator was mastery. Like mastery was so important to him. And I realized why he was frustrated. He was doing a lot of back end development work when he loves front end development. Okay. So, no wonder he felt so frustrated because he was doing something that's not aligned with who he was. Okay. So, that's my little story for you. Okay. So, the thing is, your superpower is related to your career archetype, not your title. It's a lot deeper than that. It's the one thing that you're great at, not just good at. So, when I work with clients, what I do is I have a career archetype assessment. This assessment has helped hundreds of professionals discover their unique superpower. And so, here's what we do. We look at patterns across your childhood. And I definitely recommend that you brainstorm what you've done in your childhood in order to see that common thread. We look at your entire career. It's a full career audit where we look at every single position that person has held. And I look at what they like, what they didn't like from roles and responsibilities perspective. We also look at your preferred collaboration style because I'll tell you what, some people are introverts and others are extroverts. And if you are an introvert, spending all your time talking to people and in meetings, then you're not going to feel fulfilled. This is why it's important to look at everything from a holistic perspective to identify what your zone of genius is. We also look at your values because your value system is important. The thing is, if your value system clashes with the organization's value system, then they're going to perceive what you're bringing on to the table as something that is not valuable. Okay? This is why it's important to figure these things out in order to do a job that's aligned with who you are. And then, of course, the type of social impact you want to make. So that varies from one person to another. It's not about working in a non-profitable organization all the time, but you want to feel that what you're doing at work makes a difference. And that is the definition of social impact, where it is into some shape or form helping people. Okay? Make sense? My career archetype assessment is not a multiple choice quiz. It's almost like the way I describe it, like I'm an archaeologist and I'm digging and digging through your childhood and through your different jobs and positions you've held to see that common pattern. And I do it in a way that's very efficient and science based, based on evidence. And it's been tested over and over again on hundreds of people. So, this is why when people reach out to me and say, "Hey, can you share with me the quiz?" And I'm like, I wish I could. It's almost like a doctor basically sending you a pack of needles and saying, yeah, just draw your own blood, test your own blood, and diagnose yourself. Okay. If I send that quiz to you all and let you do it yourself and interpret it on your own, your imposter syndrome is probably going to flare up. Okay. So, a few hints though to help you, right? We look for evidence through historical patterns to help you determine the right job that's congruent with who you are as a person. So, I want you to think about it this way. Your superpower, also known as your zone of genius, is the intersection of your gifts, your natural gifts, as well as your competency that creates that confidence and your story. See how I did that at the beginning? I shared with you my story. My story is also what helped me identify what my zone of genius is. Okay. So, why is this important? Because what's going on, if you don't know what your zone of genius is, what's going to end up happening is you're going to feel like you're not enough. You're always going to feel like you need to learn and learn and learn. And while learning is important, not taking action is detrimental. Okay. So we want to balance this. We want to balance this. We want to find a role that's within our zone of genius so that we're leveraging our existing formal and informal education. Because if we don't find that, we're just constantly going to fall into this trap where we're always trying to learn but not taking action. And then if we rely on title instead of our zone of genius to identify what our next role is, we're going to have a hard time seeing how our past experiences are relevant. This is why my clients don't have a hard time selling their experience because they're able to see their superpower and how it is transferable across their entire experience and therefore share it with hiring managers. So the other reason is that if you don't know what your ideal job is, then you're not going to know, if you don't know what your zone of genius is, you're not going to be able to find a career that aligns with who you are and fits into your overall story. So that's why this is important. The thing is, ultimately, when we figure out what our zone of genius is, we feel confident. We feel passionate about what we do. And that inner confidence helps us position ourselves as influencers so that we attract hiring managers who align with our value system, okay, and connect with us, okay? That's why. Okay, let's talk about mistake number 2. Mistake number 2 is you don't stand out when you talk about solving the surface level problems. Some of you may have seen this before. What do we mean by talking about surface level problems? A lot of you are taught this. You look at job postings and you want to make sure all the keywords are in your resume. But what happens is when you're looking at those keywords on a job posting that was quickly written, you're solving surface level problems, not deep problems, surface level problems. Give you an example. Setting a bold product vision strategy. All product manager roles talk about this. Coming up, understanding, aligning with the team's mission, coming up with a roadmap, working cross functionally. Guess what? Everyone is saying the same thing on their resume, and they're talking about these surface level problems, also known as keywords. And when you align your brand to surface level problems, what it does is it gets you surface level pay and maybe even gets you ghosted because you're not standing out. And so, what we need to do is we need to identify the secret level problems in order to position yourself as a unique person with secret level pay. So, all of you are like, oh my God, this is so theoretical. What does that mean? And so, I'm a woman of my word. I'm going to give you examples because people learn by example. So, on the left side, these are surface level problems, right? Bold product vision, roadmap and direction, work cross functionally. Now, why do you think a company wants you to be able to create a vision? Most likely because the company isn't competitive. They're not standing out. So they need a better vision and they need to help the developers understand why they're building features, right? And then a roadmap and direction is because the team doesn't even know where to start to implement this vision. They are lost. Work cross functionally, probably because there's a bunch of big egos. I'm so blunt. And there's a lack of alignment among stakeholders. They're butting heads, no one is agreeing on anything, nothing gets done. Now, what happens when you understand it this way is when you tell a story or when you create the messaging on your resume, when you build a brand through your LinkedIn profile, when you're sharing your interview answers, you are framing it from the secret level problem. And when a company sees that, they're like, oh my God, this person really gets us. They're treating us like humans. They're not thinking about us as a company with a bunch of robots and a bunch of processes. This is where you build the connection. Okay? I'll use myself as an example. Most people come to me telling me, "Oh, I need help with with to write a resume." Now, that's a surface level problem because at the end of the day, it's not a resume that you need, and that's not really what you're struggling with. Your secret level problem, the one that is going to require 10 drinks for you to confess to me, is that you don't know how to articulate your value. And so that manifests through your resume, through your interview questions, through networking. That's what happens. That's a secret level problem. Or some people will tell me, oh my God, I don't think I'm good. I don't think I have the right certification, or I don't have enough experience. But the secret level problem is that they're relying on their title to build authority instead of selling how they use their superpower to solve secret level problems. Oh my God, this is so meta. All right, here's what happens when you understand the secret level problems. One of my clients shared with me 4 days ago that the interviewer said right after their intro, I love your resume. Not only is it designed beautifully, but I appreciate the level of detail and depth. Detail doesn't mean that you are long winded, detail means that you go deep. Okay? Another example, a client of mine who completed my program said that part of the reason why she struggled so much is because she's done a lot. And working with me helped her shine a light on the different important phases of her professional journey. And this is why a lot of us struggle with this because we're so into our heads. We need someone from the outside to help us see the patterns. We tend to struggle with this because we've done so much, it has become muscle memory. And so it becomes difficult for us to articulate what we've done. Okay, so let's talk about mistake number 3. Your solution is long winded. Okay. So we talked about in our influencer pyramid how you need to have a superpower and how you want to help people understand how you use that superpower to solve secret level problems. And now you have to give them some kind of solution, right? Companies are bringing you on to solve a problem and they want to see what your solution is. Now, who can identify with this? They ask you a question in the interview and you become long winded. You turn into an instructional manual and you overwhelm them with a long winded answer. Okay? Who identifies with that? Anyone gotten feedback that they can be long winded and they have trouble being concise? Okay. So when you do that, you're perceived as an amateur, not an influencer. You know why? Because you haven't packaged your solution in a framework. Now, let me explain this to you. All of you know this guy. Do you know who this guy is? Simon Sinek, right? Do you know this framework? Who knows this framework? This framework is called the Golden Circle. What makes Simon Sinek's solution fancy is the way he packages it. He comes up with a framework, right? And that is what you need to do when you are providing a solution to someone. And what do you think I did? I gave you a framework to solve your problem of not getting traction in your job search or not getting quality leads, or not having people reach out to you, or not being credible, or not being discovered, I gave you the influencer pyramid as my framework. Okay. And that's what differentiates an influencer from an amateur. You all need to learn how to package your intellectual property. So the framework is the solution part of your story. Okay. All right. And this is why people struggle with this, is because you're so good at what you do, you have what I call unconscious competence. You have trouble systemizing your expertise. See, I didn't just come up with the influencer pyramid this way. I worked with coaches who helped me understand, who pulled the genius out of my head and helped me understand what is it that I do. I literally transcribed a ton of coaching sessions and we talked through it in order for me to systemize this. Okay? The thing is, when you've done so much in your career, you're so tempted to include what I call a buffet of how to stories. You're like, I've done so many things. I'm just going to give them a buffet of everything I've done. And what is a buffet? When you go to a buffet, it's so diluted, the food, because it's such a huge variety, versus showcasing your best three dishes, which is what an exquisite upscale restaurant does. And so, what you really need to do is give your best dishes that solve the deeper secret level problems through a very concise framework. Okay? Now, why is this also so hard? And I wanted to tell you that it's normal that you feel that way, because even the best writers and speakers struggle with writing their own autobiography without an editor. They struggle to take their intellectual property and package it and systemize it. They need to work with an editor. Even Will Smith had an editor. So if Will Smith had an editor, then of course you're going to struggle with this if you don't have an editor that can look from the outside and help you systemize your intellectual property and help you build a brand, whether it's on your resume, your LinkedIn profile, or through networking. And editors are not your friends. They are trained to take a story apart to individual elements and ensure nothing is missing. They are trained to probe and demand more of the author by asking questions, not stroking your ego, unlike your friends. Okay? So that's why editors are needed. So here's an example of one of my clients who landed a VP role. I worked with him to take the genius out of his head and come up with a very focused approach and a focused brand with a framework that he can share with hiring managers so that they see him as an influencer. And another client who paid a ton of money to a resume writer only to get something that didn't even represent who she was. But after working through the system and applying the influencer pyramid, now she has a brand that embodies her as the guide throughout her career. Okay? All right. So let's talk about the last mistake before I let you all go. The last mistake and the very top part of the pyramid is all about getting people to reciprocate. The thing that I see with a lot of people when they go through their job search, when they have conversations with potential hiring managers, when they're networking, is you come across like you don't care. Okay, so how do you show hiring managers that you care? Who can share with me here? How do you show hiring managers that you care? Through your passion. And this is why it's important to identify your zone of genius. People come to me because I'm very passionate about what I do. I don't fake it. If I wasn't passionate about what I do, I wouldn't be here today after what happened over the weekend with losing my dog, right? And it's such a great escape for me because I love what I do. And so this is why I recommend that everyone does what they love, because it makes things so easy for you in your life. Also, another way to make a hiring manager show that you care is making them feel heard. If you go to a doctor and you share what you're struggling with, and the doctor summarizes what they've heard, you're going to feel like they care. And so The doctor doesn't even identify your surface level problems, but they're going to identify the root cause of your symptoms, aka your secret level problems. And so this is why that's important. This is why showing people that you care is at the top of the pyramid, because all the things at the bottom of the pyramid build up to this. Okay. And of course, having a framework solution that is relevant. And then lastly, there's a reason why my program is called the Storytelling Bootcamp, is we create that connection through storytelling. Who here was moved by my story? Who here felt like I was not a robot through my story? I created a connection with you as a human being, right? And so this is why it's important to bring that in, because if you don't, then what's going to happen is people are just going to see you as someone who's bringing in a process, not a human. So some of you, when you get these take-home assignments, I get this a lot. What if I put in all this work and they steal my intellectual property? Is it even worth it? And here's what I have to say to you all. I'm giving away my intellectual property right now. There's probably competitors right now listening into my live and hoping that they can reproduce it. And frankly, I don't even care, because here's the deal. People are looking for a reason to hire you, not your process. So give them a reason. Give them a reason. Because guess what? No one is going to implement the solution the way you do. Even if they steal your process, no one is going to do it the way you do. This is why ChatGPT cannot replace you as a human being. Okay? This is why I have a community within my program, because of the importance of practicing, building that rapport, showing that you care. When you exercise that muscle, what happens is you learn how to create that connection automatically, even if you're an introvert. Okay, so that's pretty much the end of my presentation. A lot of you fixate on the how, a lot of you fixate on the type of platform when you're building a brand. You obsess about your resume, you obsess about your LinkedIn profile, you obsess about networking. These are just vehicles for your messaging, and vehicles to implement this influencer pyramid can be implemented in multiple platforms. Once you understand the how, and once you understand what you need to do, you're going to be able to do this in different platforms in order for people to see you as an influencer, in order to magnetize people to you, versus you knocking on doors and saying, please give me a job, or working too hard in the interview. No one wants to feel, after they've paid their dues, to overconvince. All right. So I hope that you found this useful. And what I wanted to say is, I know that this is something that's very difficult to apply on your own. So if you are even slightly curious and want to know how to work with me and partner with me, of course, we need to feel like we're a fit. Our values need to be aligned. You need to feel like this approach resonates with you. But if you are curious in any way, DM me influencer pyramid so that you can get on my calendar.